Okay. Great. Andrea, good morning. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Normally, I ask people to introduce themselves, but I want to ask you a question because I think when you answer the question, it's
Mhm.
going to tell us a lot about you and who you are. And so I'm just going to ask it.
Sure.
When I reached out to the coaching community and shared my story about having, lost my partner and going through kind of the grief journey and wanting to explore body work and somatic work and emotional processing and all that, what was it about that that made you, when you read it, made you go, I want to help?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think it will really shed some light on what the impact of my experience and what I've been doing in my world might be in your world. And my backstory is that I'm a registered nurse for many years. I've done a variety of things in that field and other related health fields. Um, so about a decade ago, I found that the healthcare system wasn't working for me. I was hormonally imbalanced. I was on the verge of metabolic dishealth and didn't even really know it. But I was suffering all the signs and symptoms, and I needed a way to heal myself, and it was not from a prescription
Mhm.
of any sort. And so I did what I really hadn't ever done before, and I just got super quiet and listened to my body, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Who knew that it had so much wisdom? And I began to be led to food.
Yeah.
And over the course of a couple of years, I found myself much, much better. And eh, better from things that are only supposed to get worse as we age.
Mhm.
So, hypertension went away. All the things that we commonly associate with aging um, improved or went away entirely. Joint pain, muscle pain, generalized itching, digestive problem, all kinds of things just got better. And so I knew I was really onto something. And I lost some weight when that happened. It wasn't my intention, but and it wasn't that I didn't need to lose some. I by common standards, I probably wasn't what was considered overweight, but it was noticeable when I lost weight, which probably was primarily inflammation. And of course, at the time, I really didn't know what was going on. But nonetheless, people noticed. And I really landed in a place with food that it was different than what I had been doing. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but it worked so well compared to what I was doing that I was really happy to understand it better and share with others as well. And what I found was that even though it was pretty um, clear that it worked, people didn't do it. And so I wasn't really very helpful. And then I found my way to coaching, and which is how we've connected, and really more mindset work. One of the things that improved for me when I changed my diet, and I'll say that where I landed was really what I would call whole unprocessed foods. So it was no grains, no sugar, ended up being really no legumes either. And nothing that really took any kind of processing to be able to deliver the nutrients, or at least the way that I understood it at the time. So even though I had been critical of the paleo diet as a fad diet prior to that, lo and behold, that's really kind of where I landed. And in kind of reverse engineering, like what's going on here, it was more of that kind of way of eating. But most notably for me was I had suffered decades of depression and anxiety and really what I would call ADHD symptoms that were somewhat effectively treated, not without its side effects, with medication. And I noticed that this improved when I changed my diet. So I really began to dive deep into like what's actually going on. And I really fully didn't understand, and I don't think anybody really understands. The more I learn, the more I know that we don't know. So that's the beauty of diving deep into something. I'm really comfortable in saying there's so much we don't know, even when you can Google it, these are things we don't know. And I mean, I think hopefully the jury's still out, and we're still exploring. In some cases, I think there's certain groups that have uh, drawn the line in their decision. And I think that's really unfortunate because I think we don't really know. And the reason I say that is because I would have thought that I had maximized what nutrition could do for me. And I can't really say exactly why I did it, other than it was kind of entering my zeitgeist a lot. And if there's something to be done related to nutrition, I'm the one. So it had been entering my sphere of awareness for a couple of years to eliminate plants or to eat a carnivore diet, never intending for it to be anything long term. Just I was so curious about food and nutrition and what it does in the body, that I thought I really can't walk my talk if I don't try.
Okay.
And so I did try it, and it was incredible. And I've been doing it for about a year. So again, I'm going to say the jury's still out. I'm not dogmatic about that, but I am enthusiastic about what the experience that I had. And that is that I had a level of I had other improvements and other symptoms, some GI symptoms that hadn't resolved. One of them being that when you eliminate plants, you eliminate fiber. And lo and behold, it's actually not essential. And in some people, and there are now studies that demonstrate this, that it actually is detrimental. There are people who do better without any fiber. I
Mm.
happen to be one of them, but I had never heard of that. So I didn't know until I actually did it. And lo and behold, that was a wonderful experience for me. And I resolved a few kind of lingering GI symptoms. But but more than anything, I over time just noticed this incredible sense of inner calm and peace and just stability. It was almost like there had been a low-level buzzing all the life that I can recall that just got quiet. And I thought, and it took me a little, sometimes you don't notice that something's gone initially. Um, but eventually it did hit me. And I was like, this is really, really very interesting. And I really liked how I felt eating that way. And another thing, it's super simple. Now, you could call it restrictive, and some people do. And I work with those people to help them with their mindset around that, if indeed they find that this way of eating does work for them. Um, then we work with that mindset that it's restrictive, and the common belief that it's not sustainable. Those are just opinions. Um, those are thoughts. They are not circumstances. And we work to, if indeed they decide that this way of eating works for them, then we work to change our beliefs. And boy, are they deep. They really are. And I don't want to discredit how deep they are. And this is going to come up in our conversation because there are neurochemicals generated just from our beliefs that affect how our body functions. And we're really subconsciously, we're not aware of those necessarily, but we really do need to honor them because they are happening in our body based on our beliefs. So I'm sure that there are people hearing what I say that are already having a response to the food I'm saying that was healing me.
Yeah.
And I get it. I didn't want it to, I tried it because I wanted it to not be true. Not that I knew I was looking for this inner peace that happened. That wasn't really, but I didn't want it to be true that I didn't need plants to be healthy and that they might actually be problematic. I didn't want that to be true. Um, So I totally get it. And we'll talk too probably a little bit more in detail that I'm not sure that um, in the midst of an intense grief journey, that it's the time to, you know, rub up against these really deeply held belief systems. I don't, I don't necessarily promote that. And we can talk more about why I think that is. But but I would be remiss if I didn't say that it really gave me the capacity to work with things. I'm not particularly on a grief journey, although I do think our lives are, in some way, we're always separating ourselves from something that we kind of predicated our purpose on or integrated into who we are. Like, I think there's always some of that. As we grow and mature, we let go of things, um, often not consciously. And I think that we're on a constant some level of grief journey. But when we're on an intense grief journey, when we're really trying to redefine ourselves without whatever it is that we've lost, I'm not really sure we want to dive deeply into redefining deeply held food beliefs. I also think there are a few things we can do, and I'd like to talk about why I think that's important. But there are some things we can do to really shore us up on that grief journey. Part of what I had to do when I really began to become aware that this way of eating was healing me in a way I didn't expect, I really had to find community. And you're indeed creating community around this grief journey. And it is a fundamental part of who we are as humans. We absolutely cannot feel safe in our nervous system if we don't see common behaviors around us. We normalize what our thinking based on the behaviors of others. And we don't consciously mostly do that, but we do that. And I mean, as evidenced by the fact that the first time we meet, whoever it is, the first thing you do is find something in common.
Right.
And so we're really grounding ourselves in everything we see around us to, at the fundamental level, our nervous system is making a distinction of whether it's safe or not. And as long as it's common, it's something that we have a reference point for, we can determine that it's safe. So for me, I was in this new world where I'm really trying to figure out, like, is it really possible that you can be a healthy human without eating plants? Because that's just not at all the way that I had been taught you
Yeah.
achieve health. So I began to plug into other communities of people who were not eating plants, who were eating primarily animal foods. And it became a recurring theme that people were curing addictions and lifelong mental health disorders. And then I became aware that this is actually a real thing. There are even current and ongoing studies of people with mental health disorders. Primarily, I believe it's being studied in schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but they're actually studying ketogenic diets. And I want to clear some terminology around ketogenic diet because it does have, again, that paleo fad diet kind of, and I'll clear up a little bit about that. But a ketogenic diet is being used to treat these mental health conditions. And so I got to thinking, well, okay, if it's treating the condition, then perhaps what we're doing alternatively is contributing to the cause, like what's actually happening. So briefly, a ketogenic diet, it's referred to as keto. There are lots of commercial keto products, and it's really unfortunate, but in a capitalist society, that's what we're going to do. So as long as we are aware of what happens, then, I mean, I'm sure that as a carnivore diet gains in popularity, which I anticipate it will, then there'll be more and more products, ways for people to capitalize on it. And really what happened with the ketogenic diet was the industry capitalized on people being willing to buy a solution to this way of weight loss. And but basically what ketogenesis is, it's just a metabolic state. So our bodies have two ways of accessing energy or fuel, and it's either glucose or fat. And it's just the access of energy from fat. It's burning, it's ketones. Ketones are the energy source. So that's really at its most simple, but we get this really developed, more cultural definition of it. And biologically, we don't fully understand what's going on. The reason I talk about ketosis or ketogenesis is because when you're not eating plants, you're primarily getting proteins and fats, and there's very little availability of carbohydrates. There's some, but primarily not much. So you're primarily eating protein and fat. And so you're in a ketogenic state. Your fuel source is fat. So I just found it interesting. Oh, they're discovering that you can treat mental illness. Interestingly, some of these mental illnesses are also treated with anti-seizure medicines, and they treat seizures, retractable seizures with ketosis. In some children that fail every other therapy,
Hmm.
they use this, and this has been, it was actually the only therapy back in the, I would say, 19 teens and 20s, maybe even 30s, before they developed medications to treat. So it was at one point the only therapy for epilepsy, for epileptic seizures. So interestingly, something's happening in the brain that likes ketones for fuel versus glucose. So I just began to ask really good questions about like what's really going on. And I'm the first to say I don't fully know. I mean, I don't have a PhD in this. I don't study it other than what then I have found my way to the experts,
Hmm.
and I am curious about and interested in what the experts say. And even in my own experience and in my experience in coaching, I don't particularly coach people with mental health disorders or even in a deep grief journey. I really mostly coach people who they've tried everything else. They're mostly women, um, peri or postmenopausal, who have just failed everything else. And like my prescription list is mounting. I don't want to, this is not the path I want to be on. How can we do this differently? And what really ends up happening is my my wheelhouse is helping them get to the diet that works for them. But boy, the real work is integrating that into who you are. That really is the real work. Um, and unanimously, what I've found is people achieve a level of, again, that inner peace, that really sense of confidence and competence when you're spiraling in a place of not of your health failing. It's really hard to feel confident. Like you're kind of feeling at the mercy of circumstances, and you cannot find the right circumstance to shore this up. And so we begin to really not trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. And finding a way of eating that works for you really reinstills that trust in yourself. Like, oh, there is a solution, and I'm building the tool I need to identify that for myself. And there's just a sense of confidence and competence that comes with mastering, although we never fully achieve mastery, but gaining some mastery over how to fuel your body. And we can't extrapolate our mind and our soul from our body. And this is where I really feel like it comes in when your overwhelming emotion is in grief. And not necessarily even overwhelming, but even your predominant, even if it's not overwhelming you in the moment, if your grief is predominant in what's in your life, you're taxing your nervous system.
Yeah.
And so what I'm finding is that we can really support our nervous system with nutrition and make ourselves available to have confidence and competence even in our grief journey. Like we have a level of mastery over how we can physically show up for what's been given to us to integrate into our new belief about ourselves.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes, I love this. I love it. And to give everybody just kind of like a little bit of I guess insight into maybe me and where I'm at in that, I'm 3 months into my grief journey, but I would say before that, I and probably for about 10 or 15 years before I even met my partner, I have been on like a food journey, right? Trying to, from the time I had babies and things started to change in my
Yes.
body, I am the type of person that gets very interested in food. I'm very interested in figuring out what is best for my body, what my body likes, how it responds to things. Um, so that's always been kind of, I don't want to really call it an obsession. Well, yeah, sometimes it has been an obsession.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to figure out, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
confusion in our world, not just
Mhm.
in terms of beliefs, theories, what have you, but also
Yeah.
in terms of the food itself creates incredible confusion in our bodies.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it's never been, I've always been the same weight. I think it's just genetics. I've always just from the time I was 16 till now, it's maybe fluctuated 5 pounds, except for when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's never been like a weight issue. I tend to genetically, like a lot of the women in my family, just be tall and thin.
Mhm.
But for me, it was about how I felt,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So it was about, I started out with digestive issues and
Mhm.
wanting to solve for that. And I would say now it's definitely energy, mood, and I am in menopause. So I've been post menopause. I'm 51, but I went into menopause at 44. So
Yeah.
I kind of went in a little bit early. And honestly, I think that had something to do
Mhm.
with stress and diet and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I would say before Rob died, I felt like I was fairly in a place where I thought like I had kind of figured out what my body likes. It was very simple. I pretty much ate the same things every day. That's the kind of person I am. If I find something that works,
Mhm.
I know exactly what to buy at the store every week. I have the same thing for breakfast, the same thing for lunch, the same thing for dinner, and I'm happy. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, However, I would say even with what I was doing before with my same thing every day, still experiencing the, menopause symptoms, the
Mhm.
mood swings, the hot flashes, the anxiety.
Mhm.
And then now, just kind of fast forward to now, since he died, it's been a little bit more challenging to even stick with what I know.
Mhm.
So I would describe the way that I'm operating now is definitely in a more depressed
Mhm.
state,
Mhm.
which is now I can feel that I'm just like, whatever, just give me some food.
Yeah.
Get through the day.
Yeah.
So like I had leftover pizza last night, which I just don't
Right.
do stuff like that.
Right.
And it's not bothering my stomach or anything like that, like I would maybe expect it to, but it's definitely, I can tell it's not helping.
Yeah. I think there's predominantly a really compromised functional level across the board. There are some reasons for that. So you made reference to, you went in, you had early menopause, and certainly stress is a major contributor. But so is a low-fat diet. And many of us would say, I never believed it, and I never bought into that. By default, being in our world, we are only subject to a low-fat diet. It's been the dogma for 50 years, and we're all affected by it. And our hormones require fat.
Yeah.
So I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to draw conclusions, but I am going to tell you that we are all suffering pretty significant symptoms of menopause way earlier
Yeah.
than our than historically. So there's definitely something going on there. Um, I have had improvements in my hormone levels with eating a high fat, high protein diet. So I think of it this way. So in my thoughts, I want to help people understand as basic as needed to think through how to support themselves. So one of the things that I think we're doing is we're trying to shore up from a compromised level already.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then we've got that, and we're not really comparing. I mean, we weren't ideal to begin with. So now we're in a more dysfunctional state. So what do we need to fix to feel better? And it is really, really complicated. The whole digestive system is really complicated. It can break down in lots and lots of places. But basically, we're looking to have hormones and neurotransmitters. I mean, I'm breaking it down super simple.
Okay.
Um, and hormones are supported by fat, and primarily, and then our neurotransmitters by proteins. So we look to where can we get those in our diet and make it simple. Because again, I'm coaching women who are busy. Like they don't want to, what I did for 10 years was a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. There were lots of ingredients. I was making a meat protein. I was making at least one vegetable side and also a large salad that had all kinds of ingredients in it. And I was making it tasty. So there were a lot of ingredients.
Yeah.
It took a lot of work. So people, and honestly, I think that that's why people didn't do it. It's just a lot of work. Um, and we're not, that's not normal. We're in a convenient society, so it's
Yeah.
not normal. So we're looking around us, and that's not normal. Other people don't have to do that. And I really had to do that mindset work. Like I am in my kitchen, and it's either going to take me down or pick me up. And I decided to make it my superpower, but I had to change how I thought about it.
Right.
But a lot of people, they don't want to change how they think about it. I get that. They're in a world where, how can we make this the most simple? And the way we can make it the most simple is to make sure that we get the macronutrients we need to support not just our neurotransmitters and hormones, but also the health of our body. So we can't absorb these things if if our gut's not got good integrity, if we've got bacterial overgrowth in places that they shouldn't be, if we don't have the right bacteria in the right places, all these things, um, you know, but again, how can we make this more simple? What can we do in its most simple fashion to put ourselves in the position of feeling confidence and competence in our ability for our body to function so that we can tend to what the predominant emotion that is really vying for our attention in our lives. And to me, that breaks down to protein and fat. I'm not, I don't, I think anybody should get those wherever works for them. Um, and the reason I say that is because I'll go back to our beliefs about nutrition. Really, there are very few people that doesn't include plants.
Hmm.
And so each individual needs to decide for themselves, how far can I push this and still be comfortable? And
Hmm.
it maybe not at all, maybe not at all, and that's okay. So then where do you go for your nutrition? So I always start people out with the absolute most basic, and that is to shoot for a target level of grams of protein per
Hmm.
day. So however that looks for you, generally speaking, so there's a lot of disagreement about what this is. Um, the target
Yeah.
number. Um, And the range is huge. So I really start my clients out with they're mostly women, and we mostly start out with a target of 120 grams of protein, basically equivalent to your ideal body weight in pounds. So number of grams of protein. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I think fats are super important.
Hmm.
Um, so those absolutely do need to be targeted. But fundamentally thinking, if we're targeting proteins, your three macronutrients being protein, fat, and carbohydrates. In nature, our proteins are either attached in plant foods to carbohydrates, in animal foods to fats.
Okay.
So you're really kind of going to get one or the other, unless you're eating processed foods, which I don't think the body was designed to work that way. And I think that's a huge part of why we're having problems is
Mhm.
our processed foods combine those in a way that our bodies, it doesn't work in our bodies. And we're just not figuring that out for whatever reason in a very timely fashion. So, but if you try it out in your body, you will figure that out. It will become really clear. But again, this isn't really necessarily the time that we want to be that complicated. Like you said, even prior to, for the last probably 2 decades, you've been curious and interested in how food works in your body. And now at this point, you're like, I just need to feel good enough to get through my day. Yeah, it's not a priority. So how can we dial this back to a degree that people are able to shore themselves up, their nervous system, because your nervous system is responding to what might be an imperceptible nutrient deficiency
Mhm.
that we don't yet know how to measure it clinically by a lab, but it is manifesting in your body. As again, this anxiety, depression, just this sense of um, dis-ease.
Yeah.
It's just a sense of dis-ease in the body that when your nervous system is nourished, it's making different neurotransmitters. It's not sending out a message. You got to get the right food for survival. You got to get the right food for survival. It's not that message is that we experience that message as anxiety, as dis-ease in us, but we don't translate it that way. We're not taught to translate it that way. But when you replete your nourishment, you recognize really quickly that your nervous system is sending very different messages.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So on a practical level, I I would suggest everyone shoot for, pick an arbitrary number that you will be surprised if you don't keep track of your macronutrients. You will be surprised that the number that I'm telling you is hard to achieve. You're probably not anywhere close to it, not you,
Oh,
but
sure.
everyone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not
Yeah.
at all.
Yep. Yep. 100% of every client that I've ever coached has come back and said, okay, I'm nowhere close. Let's look at how to do this. And they're really the simplest way. And I'm not a fan. My goal is to help you make nutrition easy. Like, I don't want it to be for other people what it is for me. Like, it's what I think about all the time.
Yeah.
I don't really think about food all the time. I think about nutrition often.
Yeah.
And I want people to go back to their job as a realtor. I don't want I don't want it to be first and foremost. And I do think that we get the whole healthcare system, all of our systems are very reductionistic because they're complicated. And as humans, we want to understand them, and they're difficult to understand. We don't fully understand them. So we have a tendency to reduce them into something that we can understand, but we don't get it right often. So I'm not big on tracking things. I'm big on intuiting what's happening in your body, really plugging into what's happening in your body. I think we'll be a bit surprised if we've not been doing that there are some things happening in there that we don't really know what they mean. It might take some time to figure them out. Generally speaking, I encourage people not be impulsive, but to make some observations and not label things as mistakes, but as learning. Like what information is in this for me? But in the beginning, when you don't really know what let's go with 120 grams of protein is, I do recommend tracking it.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to get an idea, like even to sit down to a meal, often we have no idea what actually composes that meal, like what macronutrients compose. Like, yeah, we don't really know. Um, there are several out there, most of them free. I happen to use Chronometer. It's super easy. I mean, you pull up a food, you put in the amount, and it'll break down the macronutrients for you. You can even set targets. So it'll give you a percentage of how close you are for your daily target. So you can use that. And then kind of go from there. I mean, everybody is going to have to choose. Predominantly, are they, if they're going to choose proteins that are attached to carbohydrates in plants, where are they going to get their fats? There are no essential carbohydrates. Believe it or not, there are no essential carbohydrates. Our blood does require glucose. If we don't eat it in terms of carbohydrates, if we don't bring it in, our body makes it. So there are no essential carbohydrates. There are essential proteins or amino acids and fats or fatty acids. To simplify things further, if you eat your proteins that are attached to fats, then you have it's less complicated in, am I nourishing my body? But again, people have to weigh, if I'm eating a lot more meat or any meat that I generally have always believed wasn't good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think that's actually true. But there's still a predominant belief that that's true. And if you have a lot of cognitive dissonance over that, being mindful that that's creating some neurochemical response in your body that, you have to decide, is now the time to kind of bump up against this belief system.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's part of our, really, I think, responsibility as a human on the planet to always be challenging our belief systems. I mean, that's just how we make a bigger contribution to being here. But there's also an appropriate time and place for that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I totally honor that. While also being really mindful that nourishing your body nourishes your nervous system and allows you to be present for what's on your plate at the moment.
Yeah. And I would say for me, even though I'm noticing that it's hard to focus
Mhm.
and I still think that it would be helpful for me at this stage to have something to focus on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in my wheelhouse. So it's not like, oh, this is totally new to me. I've never been obsessed about food or nutrition before.
Yeah.
I totally have. It has been my jam in the
Mhm.
past. It is something I think about a lot,
Mhm.
have been thinking about a lot for the last couple decades. So that's not out, that wouldn't be out of the norm for me. It
Yeah.
would actually feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing this again.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, and as I'm talking, hearing you talk and thinking about kind of where I am, I'm sort of in a spot now where, I have a lot more free time and I kind of need something
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do to kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that you begin to feel some mastery over learning content, knowledge, that feels good when we focus on things.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll say this kind of, other than focusing on 120 grams of protein, again, arbitrary number, everybody kind of listen, shoot for 100, you'll be like, that's not easy either.
Yeah.
Um, so, start where you are, but begin to kind of wrap your brain around what that is.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of what I'm dealing with is behavior change. And so I'm it's not hard for me to help people figure out there are some variability. It's not a one size fits all, but it's really not that hard. The food part's really relatively easy. It's the behavior change. It's the mindset around it. And what I the first thing I recommend that people do is plan. So what this gives you is obviously the logistical framework for what I'm going to need to be able to eat what I've decided, but it also gives your nervous system information.
Mhm.
This is coming. This is coming. So if you're focusing on this, you're telling your nervous system, this is coming. This is
Mhm.
what I have something to do. I'm going to be occupied by this. And it keeps you from ruminating,
Yeah.
on something that really isn't helpful. So this is where that kind of confidence and competence comes back in, where while you're not necessarily setting out to build your toolbox of elevating your human capacity, you really are doing that by learning how to nourish your body and your nervous system. And just by default, you begin to gain confidence and competence, and it transfers to everything else.
Okay.
Yeah. And so for people who, like you, are like, well, this is an area that is always been of interest to me, and now actually feels like a time to maybe pay attention to this more, to actually, kind of we know as coaches that when we give our brain something to do, it's far more productive and far more friendly than when we allow it to do its own thing. Yeah. I mean, we're just by human design um, problem finders. Like we're not, as humans, we weren't designed to be happy. We were designed to stay alive. So we were designed for survival. So we're always looking for the next problem, left unattended. Now we can direct our brains to not do that. Um, and we generally do find happiness on the other end of the rainbow where we're directing as opposed to finding problems. Doesn't mean we don't still find problems, but for the majority of the time, there really aren't problems. We're really relatively safe. We don't lack nourishment. We might be lacking adequate choices in our nourishment, but there's plenty of food to be had. In fact, too much food to be had.
Yeah.
And we're just relatively, we're just safe. So our human brains are a little bit out of the element under which it works best.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense to pick something that you can focus on that is going to not only physically shore you up, but really instill that confidence and competence. Okay, I'm gaining mastery over something that I feel like is healing me, is helping me on my journey.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny as you talk already, thinking about my belief system and my mindset, immediately what usually pops up around food is, oh no, I cannot eat that much.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Not just the amount of protein, but even thinking about the amount of food. Because
yeah,
when I do eat, it's always like I like a bird. It's just
it's
like
a huge shift.
yeah.
And this is at the crux of what I teach. And it's a completely different relationship with food. And that is from one of minimizing what we eat,
Hmm.
calories, because that's our mindset, to maximizing nourishment. How can I maximize the nutrition? I would find when I was eating foods that I knew were working in my body, I'm thinking, how can I eat more of this?
Mm,
How can I eat more of this? And that's a huge paradigm shift, huge paradigm shift. But it's really empowering
yeah.
when
Oh, I
you
can already
know,
feel that already.
yeah,
If I knew something that was going to do my body good,
right.
of course why wouldn't I want more of it?
Right, right. How can I
Okay.
get more of this in
Yeah.
me? Yeah. Like what are the ways that
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
get this healing food in me? So
Okay.
yeah. So there are many, many, many other health levers that are available to us. A lot is water, magnetism, sunlight. There are things that, kind of they're a little bit woo. They're really more entering kind of the sphere of real.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to see that because I think that a large part of kind of our being compromised isn't just having been low fat and having access to so much overly processed non-food food, but we were so removed from nature, and we're exposed to artificial lighting. We're not exposed to natural lighting. We're removed from natural rhythms, not just of the day, but of seasons. We can go in the grocery store and buy anything at any time. And our physiology is not that. We have, we're that it's not that. So and we don't suffer from it immediately. So there are lots and lots of other levers that when I work with people, we pull, but really starting out with nourishing with 120 grams of protein, knowing that there are essential fats as well, like it's really powerful. People can make incredible strides with just that. Particularly when we're talking about restoring some metabolic health, it's helpful to, and this is again a different paradigm, but it's helpful to not eat all the time. It is actually helpful to have that rest and digest. Mostly people who end up shifting to a whole foods type diet, and they're eliminating a lot of grains, which are dehydrated. So they're eating naturally hydrating foods. They end up eating, usually it's almost always no more than twice a day. And no snack. Now that's a transition, and I don't know that people need to shoot for that. I think people need to know that if that's what happens, it's okay. If you think about kind of how our ancestors lived, they didn't they weren't snacking all the time. They didn't, you know, so every time we eat, even if we don't eat glucose, we have an insulin response. And this is one of the hormones that is really, we're metabolically out of balance. We don't see it soon enough because we're not really there in our healthcare system that we're measuring that. But I think that's coming. And I think that the way we're currently measuring our health might not be the most responsive. We might not be getting the most information, but nonetheless, it is really common when people eat fully nourishing meals to eat less frequently. So what that might look like if you were, and I'll just break this down simplistically, you can do the math, but if you're eating 3 meals a day, we're talking about 40 grams of protein per meal. And if you're eating twice a day, it's 60. So just as a ballpark kind of, and that's a good bit of food. That's a good bit of food for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I don't even imagine unless it was purely emotional that I would be physically
Yeah.
hungry.
And yeah, and fair enough. I'll also be transparent that when I eliminated carbohydrates, which basically when I quit eating plants, I could not eat enough. Like I lost some weight because I just couldn't eat enough. I had to reverse diet. And interestingly, how I did that was with carbohydrates. So carbohydrates absolutely allow you to eat more
Interesting.
of not just carbohydrates, but proteins and fats as well. So just food for thought.
Yeah. Is that why
That
they
was,
always give you bread at the
yep,
beginning?
yep.
Chips.
And that's also why we often have variety.
Mm.
So and some of that being carbohydrates, breads, rice, even vegetables, the carbohydrates in vegetables.
Mm.
So I did have to use carbohydrates to help me eat more. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with that being a transition. And I mean, really honestly, anything that's better than what we were doing, like that's our goal, right? Every day to do better than the day
Yeah.
before.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that kind of breaks it down into what does this really look like?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And it is, I've not gained weight. I lost weight initially, and I lost the size, which for me, but it was a little bit of a problem because I changed sizes, like none of my clothes fit anymore over the course of the year. So I've been eating only animal foods for a year. And I'm not 100% dogmatic, but I have good metabolic health. Um, and but primarily, I'm going to say 98% of is animal foods. Over the course, I lost 10 pounds, and over the course of the next 9 to 10 months, I gained like 5 or 6, and but stayed the same size. So I'm going to go with that protein allowed me to gain muscle. I
Cool.
did. I do go to the gym. I'm not nearly as much as one might think, or think is necessary. And I don't really, I like to press the limits of what I can, but I'm not really like I'm more of a token. I'm there. I'm gonna call it going to the gym, and I'm gonna do something because I'm there. But I'm
Yeah.
really not. I'm not that married to the gym. In fact, I don't think you even need to go to the gym to do those things.
Hmm.
But I just found it interesting that over the course of probably 9 or 10 months, I put on just little by little, put on a little bit of weight, and I was able to increase the weights that I lift as well. And I mean, really without, so I can only attribute that to the protein. Because prior to that, I didn't count protein. I just looked at food. I didn't. So, and to be completely transparent, I don't track it on a daily basis either. I just have a good idea of what it looks like. And then I follow my body. I don't think that, I think again, we reduce nutrition to calories. We think that, like our weight is an indicator of our health. I mean, it's kind of how culturally we do this, and I don't really think that's necessarily true. And I also think that our energy demands are different from day to day.
Hmm. Sure.
We can't, yeah, we really can't just put an arbitrary number on it. And so we're not necessarily creating a deficit by going under 120. Like if I'm 115 one day, that's okay. And if I'm 140 one day, that's probably fine too. So we have a whole system in our nervous system that regulates our metabolism, our hunger, our energy expenditure. And a lot of us are deranged. It's hormones we're not even going to talk about, but they're there, and they're affecting our hunger, our energy expenditure, um, lots of things. So it's just not fixed. But all we can go by is something fixed, arbitrary, and then how we feel.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, it's so good. I feel like I could talk to you all day about it. So what next? Like for our time together right now, where would you go next?
I mean, I think I'd keep it super simple and shoot for, what am I currently eating? Is it nourishing my nervous system so that I can show up my best and confident and competent in my physical capacity to deal with my emotional
Okay.
demand at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at a practical level, look at what you're eating. Maybe just start out with tracking what you're eating to get a good idea of where you are.
Okay.
Give that a few days, and then little by little look at, okay, how can I bring in more of what is going to nourish my nervous system? What's going to help me build these neurotransmitters? What's going to take the stress away?
Mhm.
What's going to shore up my hormones?
Yeah.
And
Do you like, because of course I have questions. I'm like, okay, where does the protein come from? Do you like recommend certain qualities of protein? Things like that? Or,
yeah.
and I'm sure you do.
Well, so what I'm going to say is probably not what the average listener is going to want me to say. Um, and and I get it.
Yeah.
But by and large, the highest quality, and when I say quality, so we can think of quality as in what the body does with it, or
Okay.
we can think of quality as how it got to us. So,
Yeah.
like how it was raised and processed, and, how it got to us.
Yeah.
I think that the quality of the food itself, how it got to us, I love that topic. I
Hmm.
don't think that I think that it's still undecided. So what I might be saying is grass-fed, pasture-raised, things that take into consideration not just the nutrient value of the food, but how it affects our environment as well.
Yeah.
Man, those are really deep topics that are, I think, still really undecided. And we have to do a lot of work that's not probably yet been done. I don't know that now's the time. If indeed it is that time for you, if it's something that you must reconcile, then by all means do that. If you have to reconcile that to be able to get to the next step, then by all means. But if you can suspend that and allow yourself the permission to, okay, that's on my, eventually that will bubble up in importance. But right now, I'm looking at how do I get quality in me?
Mm-hmm.
And mostly, so plants actually come with anti-nutrients. And we really aren't taught this. It's a deep subject. At the end of the day, what plants, how they are lower quality is that the vitamins in them are not in the form that's usable by our body. So we still have to convert them.
Yeah.
And if we're not metabolically healthy, then we probably aren't making that conversion very well. And there are a lot of anti-nutrients that either bind with or prevent the absorption. Somewhere along the digestion, absorption, and metabolism, there's interference in the nutrients that come from plants. They can be that some of that can be mitigated, takes some work. But nonetheless, they're still there. There are some anti-nutrients in animal foods, but not nearly as many.
Interesting.
And we're more shored up physically that we are able to manage those.
Mm.
And so at the end of the day, animal foods are more bioavailable. The nutrients in animal foods are more bioavailable, and plant foods can be inflammatory. But again, people have to weigh, how much dissonance this creates, and what their capacity is to challenge their belief systems at any given time. For the vast majority of people that I've encountered who have moved away from plants and are eating animal foods, most of them eat meat, all kinds of meat. I'm going to come back to that in a second, but any meat, eggs, if they tolerate them. It's often that people don't initially tolerate them, but then ultimately they begin to be able to tolerate them. Lots of butter, believe it or not. It's actually a health food. Yeah, believe it or not. And then dairy is always kind of the one that's in question, really. That is the one animal food that comes with carbohydrates attached to it in any significant amount. And it can be, there's such a thing as a carb addiction. And so if that's you, then dairy probably isn't something you want to have a lot of. Generally speaking, fermented dairy is better, mostly because what it does is it actually ferments the lactose or the sugar into a bacteria, so a beneficial bacteria. So it actually reduces the carbohydrate content, which really kind of is probably what's most beneficial about it. But it still can be what our brain registers as kind of hyper palatable, not like a processed food, but again, maybe in some people enough to where that can kind of have more of an addictive quality. And so dairy kind of is the one that really stays kind of on the fence. I'm going to come back to meats because it does seem like, and this was my natural experience as well, and then I began to seek out other people's experience and notice that they were having the same. There's something about beef that is more nutritious, which is, again, completely not what people either want me to say or they, are hoping that not what I say, but indeed red meat is
Yeah.
highly nutritious. It's very, digestible. In the beginning, if you go heavy on really any meat, when you haven't been a heavy meat eater, you might need a little digestive support just because our body's accommodating what it's used to.
Yeah.
And so we might not be making all the bile and digestive enzymes, in the in the quantity that we're asking for to digest meat, even though it is the most bioavailable. So I will kind of throw that in there if, somebody's like, oh, I'm willing to just eat. Yeah. There are some caveats that, require maybe a little bit of transition or support. But yeah, it does seem like particularly ruminant animals are a more nutritious source of meat.
I'm
And
personally
in
happy to hear you say that because I don't like poultry. I can't stand chicken.
Well, and
I
so
have eaten that way before. The way that you're talking about, I've, very much done that before in a time when I was really sick and trying to get better, and it did help.
yeah, and
I don't know why I got away from it. It's kind of interesting to think about. Like that did work for me in the past. I don't know, who
that
knows?
is an interesting thought experiment. And I would ask you to think about how much of what's happening around you influenced where you ultimately kind of defaulted to a different behavior.
Yeah.
Because we're so often not really conscious that we're taking on the behaviors that are common because that's human nature to do what feels safe. Like it just feels safe because that's what's common. We're not processing it that way, and I just keep saying this because there will be cognitive dissonance over this. There will be, and it's totally, everybody has to decide for themselves, but be aware that what's happening around you is really strongly influencing what you do, even if you're not conscious of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and this is why there's, probably some aversion to what I'm saying, that, that red meat actually rules and it's kind of king. And that's completely opposite. And this is why there are large and growing carnivore communities, carnivore being just the diet, the way of eating, because it is different. It's so very different. And we do need community around, whatever it is we're trying to normalize in our lives.
Okay.
So I would pose that perhaps why you didn't stick with that
Yeah.
is really more because that's what wasn't what was happening around you.
Yeah, for sure. And even just thinking about it now, yeah, I can see that pattern and I'll give that some more thought. So it's cool because today is January 16th, the day that you and I are meeting right now and talking about this, but this episode won't go out to the public just because of the lineup that I've got
Mhm.
until probably March or April.
Mhm.
So what will be cool about that is I'll have something to report by then.
Yes, I
It's
would
like
love
go
to.
out
Yes.
tomorrow and I'm just like, okay, I'll guess I'll update you guys later. No, I'll be able to update people when this goes live to kind of let them know where I'm at. And I will start, like you suggested, just like paying attention to what I'm doing right now. And then, kind of compared to well, because I'm sure it'll be vastly different compared to
Mhm.
what, is going on here. But I'm super open to it. Again, it's not new to me,
Mhm.
which is gonna, I think, be really helpful.
Very helpful. Yes. Just having that, it's almost impossible to put value on the fact that you have some evidence from your past.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have some evidence that this worked.
yeah.
And most people are probably coming from not
Having
that.
not ever, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
gone down
So
that.
I think it will be helpful for you to be able to more easily dip you have a lot less cognitive dissonance about this.
Yeah.
You can dip your toe into it probably much more deeply, and it will be. I'll be so curious what your experience is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the other cool part too is I'm with a doctor who is drawing blood and
Mhm.
testing my hormones and stuff, like every 8 weeks or so right now. So it'll be just kind of interesting to see what happens there. One thing I do want to touch on before we end is supplements.
Yeah.
Like you're kind
That's
of
a great question.
But
Yeah, yeah, because people are just blown away by the fact that we can actually meet all our nutritional demands, requirements
yeah,
from meat. Yeah,
that's
from
what,
animal foods. Yeah. So I was able to shed all my supplements.
yes.
I do supplement with iodine, interestingly enough. It is the one thing that I supplement with.
Yeah.
And there's one other on my radar, but I don't know enough about it yet and it's not as benign kind of. Iodine is water soluble and I don't want to suggest that you can't overdo it. But I feel more confident in iodine, but I took everything else away. Now, minerals do become so when we're not I don't want to get too into it. You'll lose water weight. You will lose water weight when you cut carbohydrates, if indeed that's how you go about adding your protein is by cutting carbohydrates. Sounds like that's what you're going to do. Um, you will lose water weight and you'll lose some electrolytes with that. So sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Um, there are replacements that you can buy, packets that you can put in your drinks. I make my own, but I over time, and I've heard other people say this as well, I need less and less of it. My body just recalibrated,
Okay.
but not always in the beginning. It is important to actually salt your food. Again, lots of cognitive dissonance about that. Preferably not iodized table salt, which is why I supplement with iodine because I don't use iodized table salt. I use an actual real salt that's full of other minerals as well. So those would be the only two things that I would say. I would leave iodine off the table initially. And I include it's not that meat doesn't have omega-3s, but they're more, and it isn't an essential amino or fatty acid. I incorporate a fair amount of seafood in my what I call meat. I would include seafood. So no supplements, believe it or not. I think we're supplementing ourselves into somewhat of a catastrophe, to be honest. Our bodies need to balance these out for ourselves, and we need to get them from our foods.
Yes.
So, yeah. So it's been wonderful to be able to like just eliminate a couple $100 a month in supplements. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd much rather spend that money on whole foods, like, real
Yes.
food. And okay,
Yep.
beautiful.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, even for me, I don't take any medications.
Yeah.
So I don't have that.
So no HRT, no hormone replacement therapy.
So that I don't consider that a medication. I have
Okay.
been hormonally imbalanced since as a teenager.
Yeah.
So I was set up for a lifetime of hormone imbalance. And in fact, long history of infertility, endometriosis, long history of um, so I've been on hormone replacement for a long time. Um,
Yeah. I'm currently bioidentical.
yeah. Yeah. And I don't really, so there are people who believe that you don't need them and that enough fat in your diet will shore you up. I have not had that, but I'm still in the real world. So I don't know if I could heal my body enough to achieve a balance I never had. It's not like I'm not
Yeah.
even trying to restore a hormone. I never had it. So I do, but I don't consider that a medication.
Okay.
It's just a replacement of something that I don't make enough of in my body. And I still hold out hope that eating a high fat, high protein diet
Yeah.
will and I actually have gone down on the dosage. I have been able to go down on the dosage.
Interesting.
But other than that, no medications. Other than I side note, I had have a chronic neurological pain condition,
Mhm.
extremely rare, terribly unfortunate that it happened. Most people find it progressive and debilitating,
Mm.
and I have been able to manage it with low dose naltrexone, which is a probably so the condition is a misfiring in my central nervous system. I have peripheral symptoms. I had surgery on my foot and it triggered it. They don't really understand it, but it's in my central nervous system. And so that medication has an anti-inflammatory, but I do a low dose, so that's compounded. But it's allowed me to come off. I was on pain medication, and it's allowed me to come off the pain medication. And it was really only when I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but when I eliminated plants, that's when I was able to start coming off the pain medicine.
Interesting.
So
So
I,
fascinating.
again, an association, I don't know,
Yeah.
but prior to that, I was dependent on a pain medication as well. So, but nothing for blood pressure. I don't know, I don't take any antacids. I don't, none of all that. No, SSRI, which I had a history of in the past. I haven't been on anything like that since changing my diet even more than a decade ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I've taken up enough of your time today. It's so good.
It's perfect. It's 11:11.
Yes, it is perfect. So before we end though, I want, and if there's any other links that you want me to add to the notes, please give them to me. But for now, can you, for people that are hearing you and hearing this and they know they're ready to take a step,
Yeah.
want to talk to you and work with you, can you tell them how to find you?
Yeah. So I'm really in the early stages of doing this full time.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
just left a corporate job, thankfully. And so I am currently, most of my content is in on my business page on Facebook. It's Vibrant Health RN. I'll send you that.
Okay.
And mostly what I'm doing right now, I run a 6-week metabolic reset where I work really close with people to dial in this part, the diet, get the diet situated. And then I do a longer term really mindset
Mhm.
shift because again, we've talked about how much cognitive dissonance this is and how we really have to show up in the world in a way that feels safe, doing something really different than what really kind of most people are doing. One of the things that I did when I began to eat an all animal diet and I had this sense of peace about me, I thought, I didn't have an alcohol problem, but I thought about it a lot, like at least on a daily basis. I decided whether or not I was going to have a half a glass of wine or whatever with dinner. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't want this to take up my bandwidth anymore. And so I just quit. It doesn't mean I never have a drink. It means I'm not a regular drinker anymore. Like if I want a fantastic cocktail, I'm going to have one. But every day I don't decide whether, or, it's just
Yeah.
it's not in my zeitgeist anymore.
Mhm.
So, that's just the kind of mindset shift that was available to me. And so in the longer term program, I help people adjust, and I had to adjust to the rest of the world is still doing that. They really are. They really are. Everywhere I go, that's what they're doing. And so I really had to do the mindset work around I'm going to be different. And and I and I had to redefine why I was going to the places that I was going because they're eating and drinking things I'm not eating and drinking. So why am I there? And it really was like, I had to change my mind about things, how I thought about things. So that's really what we do in the longer term kind of work together is just really integrate these changes into one's life.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll send you a link and primarily what I'm doing now is I really break down, I do a webinar every other week, and I'm just breaking down how I've begun to think about nutrition, breaking down a lot of what we talked about a little bit even more in detail,
Yeah.
um, and then talking about how to do it practically.
Okay.
Yep. And how to think about food differently. I really want to go back to we used to think about food as minimal, we ate a bird size, and now I'm thinking, what if I was gonna hibernate? Like, how could I get enough? Like,
I'll
how
be
can I
thinking
get,
about that for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
a huge mindset shift. You'll
Yeah.
be, if you set yourself kind of a prompt
Mhm.
to recall that, you'll notice how often you think about food from trying to minimize it versus trying to maximize
Yeah.
nutrition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge mindset shift. And that's part of that competence and confidence is, I can't, like, this is not hurting me. This is actually helping me,
Yeah.
which is, I don't think how we think about food.
Yeah. And I'll just stress like the importance of the mindset side. So for anybody listening and thinking about working with you, like that is so important. And I will say, and this is just my opinion, but the best coaches are the ones that do their own work, which
Yep.
you've obviously done. And
Yep.
obviously like it's important to you. And I think that that's what makes the best coaches. So
Coaching changed my life. I did not know that that you could actually focus your thoughts. I
yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
So props to all of our teachers, and one in particular who has changed
Mm, yeah.
significant number of lives. And and I just feel like that's really why we're here.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
And we can't be here in a physical body without it being healthy. So
Mhm.
what better place to start?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I
Oh,
could talk to you all day. I have to let you go. It's so good. Thank you so much. I can't
my
wait to
pleasure.
share. I can't wait to see what I have to share when it does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know
And you know how to reach me. If I can help you, if you have questions, things, I'm happy to do it.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.